Okay, let's talk about how organizations and companies have evolved prior to the AI revolution and how they are likely going to continue to evolve as a result of the AI revolution. So the companies as we know them today are really a construct of the Industrial Revolution. And during the Industrial Revolution and the invention of the assembly line, you were primarily doing factory work. So the average worker was part of an assembly line or something similar, and your job was to stand on that assembly line and put the tire on the axle of the car, and then the person next to you, their job was to bolt the tire to the axle, and then the person next to them was to put the rubber on the tire and inflate it, and on down the line. And jobs, were broken up into a job that needed to be done. You're the person that puts the bolts on the nuts for the tires on the assembly line, and the skills that were needed to complete those jobs. Let's see if this guy's catching a fish here. So you had jobs and you had the skills needed to complete those jobs. So that was one thing with the Industrial Revolution era companies. The second was that the work that was done by the average person in the company was not, you didn't need a whole lot of intelligence oftentimes to do that work. And in fact, really what you wanted was someone to do that job that would follow the exact specifications for that job. So you didn't really necessarily want them to do a whole lot of thinking. And so that's why we had this very top-down corporate structure where you had a few people at the top of an organization that did all the thinking and strategizing and planning. And then you had a whole bunch of people at the bottom of the organization that were really, their job was really just to do the job as they were told to do it. And then you had layers of management, middle management, whose job it was just to make sure that those people were hired, trained to do that job, and were following the instructions that they'd been given. And there's books that were written about this. I think Scientific Management and The Corporate Man. I forget the exact name of the other book. But, it was all about, outlining these jobs to the point where everything could be measured down to how many bolts you put on the wheel and how long it took you to put the bolt on the wheel and how many bolts you put on the wheel versus the next person who stood on the assembly line putting bolts on the wheels. Everything could be measured. And then the last thing that I'll say is, this is where the 9 to 5, 40-hour work week in office, quotation marks, because it's really in factory, came from. You really needed to be at work during the same hours as the other people that were standing on the assembly line with you. Really the exact same hours, because if the person that was, screwing the bolts on the tire was working different hours than the person who was putting the tire on the axle, then the whole assembly line method of working really broke down. So, this is why, prior to the knowledge economy and knowledge work, you really didn't have an option besides working together during the same hours. Okay, so now fast forward to the knowledge economy, and essentially every single one of those things has been kind of flipped on its head. It's almost the exact opposite. So what was the first thing that we talked about? We talked about work being very mechanized and scientific process. You know, you follow this exact process. Well, now that work has been automated. Certainly from a factory standpoint, it's been automated. And with AI, even from a cognitive standpoint, if work doesn't require much thinking, then if it hadn't already been automated, it's on a fast path to being automated. So now you need the opposite of what you needed during the Industrial Revolution. During the Industrial Revolution, you needed people that would just follow instructions and follow those instructions very well, and you needed people kind of watching over and micromanaging all these processes and the people doing them. Now you need people who can think outside of the box and be creative and deal with a very dynamically changing environment. That's another thing. The factory floor didn't change all that much. Where our knowledge work, things are constantly changing and new things are being invented and new ways of doing things. So you really need creative people who can think and think outside of a process is what you need now. It's the opposite. Okay. What was the other thing that we talked about? What was the second thing that we talked about? The second thing that we talked about was this top-down hierarchy of people at the top who were making all the decisions and doing all the strategy, and the people at the bottom just doing what they're told. Now again, you need people at the bottom really that are closest to the work, empowered, involved in the discussions of what's happening, where should we be taking the business. It's the exact opposite. You want people thinking that. Now I guess that the thing that's not the opposite is if you have people at the top, you also want them to still be thinking, but they're more synthesizing, or should be more synthesizing the information that they're receiving from the smart people that they have on the front lines of the organization, versus just kind of sitting in an office and strategizing and thinking things up and then handing the instructions down for the peons to execute. Okay. All right. Now, in terms of all being at the office together, now, certainly I'm not here to tell you that there's not benefits with knowledge work of being in an office together. I certainly think there are, especially when you're doing creative thinking or brainstorming. Certainly being together and working together, there are benefits to that. But I think the fact is now you don't have to be in an office at the exact same time as everyone else to do the work. So that opens up a whole world of opportunities in terms of providing people with more flexible work hours, hiring people in different time zones and in different places throughout the country or throughout the world. So there's challenges with all of these things, but you went from a scenario where you have to be in the office together to a scenario where you don't always have to be in the office together to get the work done. And then management, they're no longer about micromanaging. They're about empowering the people and removing roadblocks and these types of things. All right, so what's likely to change in the future? Well, I think one of the first things that's likely to change is a lot of the non-work of working is going to be automated. So what do I mean by non-work? So a lot of time spent by managers is in updating the powers that be on what's happening within the business, or even updating other teams, making sure that the information is flowing throughout the organization. That function of management should really have been automated away before AI, but there's all sorts of different tools and blah, 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 and it's hard to do. But I think AI is going to make that process so easy that any company is just going to be able to kind of do away with all the management time that's spent compiling reports for different people and keeping different people in the loop. You're just going to have all your information flowing through this corporate digital brain, and it's going to be sending out the relevant updates to the relevant parties, and it's going to be continually optimized so it gets better and better at keeping the right people up to date with the right information. And it's going to be, not only is it going to save a whole lot of management waste, but it's also going to be much more powerful in terms of being able to keep more people in the loop with the right information at the right time throughout the whole company. Same thing with things like performance tracking and etc. Like all that time that's spent, it was needed before artificial intelligence because knowledge work is much harder to measure than industrial era work is. It's much more subjective, but I think with artificial intelligence, it's just going to be better at taking in the subjective and outputting a fair and unbiased look on who's providing the most value within the organization. Oh, another thing that's an industrial era thing is standardized wages for standardized work, right? So when work was standardized, it makes sense that the person that's screwing widgets on the wheel on Tuesday gets paid about the same as the person who's screwing widgets on the wheel on Wednesday, or maybe they can do it 10% faster so they get 10% more. But when you're in a knowledge economy, oftentimes the gap between the best person at a job and the average person isn't a factor of 10 or 15%, but it's a factor of 200 or 300%, or 2 or 3 times as good as the average person. So standardized pay for standardized work is kind of a relic of the past, and I think that that's going to change in the future. Okay, so now also another thing that's going to change as a result of AI is the automation of cognitive labor. Okay, so the Industrial Revolution, we automated manual labor, so one person with a tractor can do the work of 100 people tilling the field by hand. Now one person with AI is going to be able to do the work of 100 people working without AI. So that's going to start with just, we always start with the automation of whatever it is that we're doing currently. So just looking at the jobs that we're doing currently and what can we automate. So anything that, doesn't require any sort of creative thinking is going to be going first. So for example, scheduling a meeting, and getting the relevant parties to agree to a meeting time. How many times have you bounced around a bunch of different emails, and how much time is spent just getting everybody in the room at the same time or on the Zoom call at the same time? That type of stuff's just going to go completely away, and AI is going to handle it. It's going to have access to our calendars, and it's just going to choose the right time and put it on everybody's calendar, and that's it. So again, we talked about someone reaches out and says, what's the status of this project? They're not going to have to reach out to you anymore. They're just going to ping the digital brain for the corporation, and the digital brain will update them with the status of the project. So stuff like that. Posting on social media, doing the graphics for an article, all these types of things are going to be automated, and blah, blah, blah.